Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Today we're going to be focusing on your digital audience and trying to understand if that audience is growing, shrinking, or staying the same. Behind me we have an example online business with about 1,100 daily active users. The question is, what is this audience size going to be in 1 month, 3 months, 4 months? I'm going to show you the exact analysis that we can do to answer this question, and we'll be doing it step by step in MySQL together. So here's an analysis of installs and churners per day, along with an additional orange trend line that represents installs net churners. And that value, or resulting value, tells us how many incremental players we're gaining or losing per day, impacting our overall audience growth. So let's move over to MySQL and do this together. We're going to start with an installs table. Because again, if you look at the analysis, we need installs per day, churners per day, and then installs net churners. So here's our installs table. And we're going to take the very first install instance per customer. Okay, there are our installs. Let's call this entire subselect B, because funny enough, this isn't going to be our base table. Our base table, we're going to call this A, is our logins table. Right, so these are customer logins per day, and we're going to call this A. And what we want to do is bring across install data. So what we want to do is we'll have this logins table and then have an additional column here that flags whether or not that login date was also the customer's install date. And we will do a left join over to the B subselect for the install data. And we'll say if the install date is not null, add a 1, if not, add a 0 to that binary sort of column that serves as a flag. We can just simply call this install flag, so do this. And let's check our work. We have a subselect here, which is going to be the very first install date per customer. We have our login table, we're joining on customer, and where the login date from the login table is equal to the install date from the install table. So if the install date is not null, that means they installed on that login date. Scribe a 1, if not, scribe a 0. Okay, great, this worked. You can just call this the customers table. Let's bring these columns in. So in order to calculate churn, we need two columns. We need the max login date value for the entire table so that we can build our analysis around the max sort of date in our data source. And then in addition to that, we need to know the max login date per customer. That's so that we can calculate churn per customer. Great, run this. This can take a little bit of time, but here we go. So max login date overall, so this is data through September 1st, 2024. As you know, today's date, or the date of this recording, is September 4th, 2024. And then this is the max login date per customer. So this is important, right? Because what we need to do now is define how many days of inactivity qualifies as being churned. It's typically 14 days, so we'll use 14 days and we'll add it to this value here. And if it's less than or equal to September 1st, 2024, we can count them as churned. So let's create that variable now. Days to churn. We'll say 14 days of inactivity. We can just call this entire subselect churn. Okay, let's create the churn date field. So for each customer's max login date, we're going to add 14 days. Let's run this. So what this is going to do is add 14 days to each customer's max login date. And if that churn date is less than or equal to September 1st, 2024, we can count them as churned. Remember, we also have this install flag, so when that is set to 1, we can count the number of players per day to also get a count of installs per day. So with a combination of those two columns, we can recreate that analysis. Great, we have everything. We have the install flag, we have the churn date. We're about ready to aggregate this data. Okay, so we want the login date. And now we want a count of installs. So we will do this. When this flag equals 1, we will count the customers. And we don't necessarily need this, but it's always good to just add more metrics. So if we do a count of this is going to be the DAU, daily active users, which will be that roughly 1,100 number per day. Now we need churners. So we'll do case when the max login date is equal to this login date and the official churn date, is less than or equal to September 1st, 2024. That's the date that our data is through. Then let's count the customer. Else null end. Okay, let's check our work. Count of customers by day, that's DAU, that's our audience size. When the install flag is 1, that's a count of installs. When the max login date or the last login date for each player equals a login date, and the churn date is less than or equal to September 1st, 2024, then we're counting the customer and there'll be a churner. So the only thing we need to do is make sure that we have enough leading data for the churn metric. So we will do where is less than or equal to the date that our data is through, which is September 1st, 2024. Great, let's run this. So we have all the metrics we need. We have an aggregation or count of installs, and then we have a count of churners. So what we're going to do is for the churners, we're going to take those values or those numbers and multiply it by -1. And when we do that, we will be able to create an analysis where you see the installs having positive numbers, the churners having negative numbers, and then installs net churners. So here's our data. Let's take this over to Excel. Great, here we are. So here is our DAU. Remember, that becomes about 1100. Here are our installs and churners. You want to do installs net churners, so that's going to be installs minus churners. Great. And then what you want to do is take churners and multiply this by -1. There we go. And then we're kind of ready. Okay, here is exactly what we want. Okay, so I'll go into a little more detail here. So here in the blue, we have a count of installs per day. And in the gray, we have a count of churners, or people that we've lost as customers per day. The orange trend line is installs, so our blue minus our gray, which are the churners. So whenever this metric or KPI is positive, it means that our digital audience is effectively growing. You'll see here that the baseline is probably losing, it's probably about -10. Then as you get closer to the current date, it gets a lot worse, right? There are a lot more churners. So as someone who focuses on analysis like this, it's really important to realize that the closer you get to the current date, the number of churners are overestimated. And I'll explain that now, which is, let's say we haven't seen you for 14 days back in 2022, and we count you as churned. All of this leading data to basically reactivate or re-engage the business or product, right? So you could be counted as a churn data point here back in 2022, after we don't see you for 14 days, but then maybe 90 days later, you reactivate, reinstall, and become an active user again. And that churn data point, when the SQL query is run again, gets removed. So people up here don't have that leading historical data to take advantage of. So what ends up happening is a number of churners gets overestimated. So what I would do in this scenario is pick a rational or reasonable baseline, right? Which is about losing maybe 10 players a day, incrementally per day. And if we take that and bump it up against our DAU, or audience of about 1,100 users, that suggests that within 3 to 4 months, if install volume doesn't change and we don't increase the number of installs, that audience will be gone. So again, I really hope you enjoyed this step-by-step tutorial, and I think it's a fantastic way to look to the future in terms of understanding how your digital audience is growing or shrinking or staying the same. If you like this content, continue to like and subscribe. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.